do we have everyone from the team? We're good?
Yep, we're good.
Amazing. All right.
I have 2 announcements to start, though.
Do the announcements and
about
please
questions.
start lining up for questions.
Yeah. About questions you may have, and this may have you turn around, I'm not sure. There are 2 types of questions that are not going to be answered. One is release dates. Things will ship when they're ready. I nail that? Cool. And we're not live debugging. So if you have a specific problem, file an issue, ask Stack Overflow, or ask Alyssa.
Preferably the third. I'll be over there. All right. Let us start the Q&A. Are they rolling in online? Do we see them?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I got a yes. All right, Andreas, start us off.
Okay. I just have a short question. I'm still using the Angular Material 1 stuff from 16.2 or something. When will that stop working?
Sorry. Could we,
I'm using the old Angular Material version, or the legacy stuff, with all the deprecated classes.
Yeah, we have talked about making sure that version keeps working a little bit longer, but we haven't, I don't know that we actually came to a fully decision. I think with the upcoming 18, it will still continue to work, but
okay,
yeah.
that's fine for the foreseeable future. I think you cannot make any promises for 19 or whatever. That's okay. So,
but yeah, we definitely know that it's a pain point for a lot of people.
Okay.
Right. Make sure you guys speak up in the mic. I do believe this is the loudest it can go, but I'm not sure. So yes, speak up.
All right. Hello. I noticed decorators are falling out of fashion, but should I be concerned about not being able to use them at all in the future? Even if it's not in the framework, just as a TypeScript thing, can I make custom decorators to solve problems and rely on those?
Yeah, I would say it's actually the opposite. I don't know if maybe Alex or Minko, if you want to expand on this a little bit more, but one important thing I'll point out is that the decorators in Angular are not real decorators. They are using TypeScript's experimental decorators, and the Angular compiler looks at those at compile time, says, cool, I know where your template is, I know what your selector is, I'm gonna grab that and get that decorator out of there. And us using that experimental decorators is actually kind of getting in the way in some ways of using the actual real decorators. And so
They don't work.
us kind of if we introduce APIs that are not using decorators, it's kind of moving away from that problem a little bit. And there's more I can say, but I won't hog the airtime.
No, that covered it pretty well, I think. Decorators are a part of the JavaScript standard now. They're going to continue to work indefinitely because of that, as far as we know. And Angular we would love to be compatible with standard decorators. We are in some ways, but standard decorators don't yet have parameter decorators, for example. So some parts of Angular still kind of need the experimental decorator support. Hopefully that will not be the case forever.
All right, let me take this over here. We're gonna ease into this. So Not Joe asked, why is ng-conf so awesome? Sorry, that's a debugging problem. Slip through. So Jeffrey Cross, he says, who is the best man at Minko's wedding, and can it be me? And by me, it's Jeff, not me.
Well, you can open a feature request for that.
Hopefully that was helpful, Mr. Cross. You know where to find him.
Don't tempt him.
Back to the, okay. All right, Jonathan, what do you got?
Hi. So I do have a question with the new @defer syntax. I'm the type of guy that likes to do a lot of transitions and animations, and with the old way of ng-conf and switching else, I had a problem where, like, let's say I had a placeholder, you know, it was ghost loading, and then I wanted to switch over to an image. I needed like 0.5 seconds or a second to do a slow fade to the other ng-conf, but I couldn't do that, so I had to do class bindings for that. But I was wondering if the @defer supported a slow transition so that you can animate between the placeholder that is, like, let's say a ghost loader placeholder of the actual content that's coming.
That's a good question. The short answer is no, it does not. I think our preference is that it would be best to rely on the native CSS behavior over the built-in libraries for this particular use. We just haven't put a lot of effort into the animations library these days.
Yeah, I think someone else can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this is something you could use view transitions for, and it would actually be a pretty good fit for this use case.
Yes, that is absolutely true. You could use view transition.
Okay, thank you.
Someone on the Angular team who may or may not be named Jessica has also brought forward a proposal to the CSS working group on animating removal of elements, which is something that might also help in this case.
Yes, I did open up a feature request with the CSS working group to let you actually specify in CSS how to animate away elements when they're being removed so that you don't have to write any JavaScript. So if you like that idea, please go upvote it. It would be wonderful because we wouldn't need to do any extra work.
But really, though, we want that feature, so go vote on it.
All right, just give me a second here. I'm actually voting for that feature. I personally love it. All right, so Jason C. has a question as follows. Which user events are captured and replayed for partial hydration? Question mark. Will this also be available for older destructive hydration methods?
That's 2 questions. That's more questions than we allot per person. I'm just kidding.
So choose the easy one. Just the easy one, go with that.
So JS Action, I believe, is implemented to support just the native built-in events. So you can't do custom events with it. So it'll basically support anything that is like a native browser event. And what was the other question?
Why are you so great?
Why am I so great? No, that's your question.
Yeah.
What was the second question?
Will this also
Destructive
be
hydration.
available for older destructive hydration methods?
That is a good question, and I don't think so, but we haven't really talked about it's too really early in that process for us to really know. But it'll definitely be available for full app hydration without partial hydration.
Jason says thank you.
You're welcome, Jason.
Last question from the middle. We're going to take the line and move it over to the side so that everybody can see the whole stage.
Oh.
Right? Thank you for that feedback.
Will you follow me like some weird caterpillar?
Yeah. So just the 3 of you in line, going over this way. Yeah, Lance, you can come too.
Yeah, Lance.
Yeah, man.
Do you have a question though, or is that was all?
I do. I can hold on to my question. I'm good.
All right, Lance. Ooh, don't do that. All right, Lance, what's your question? You guys can go this way.
So yesterday in Raphael's talk, he suggested that we use the host binding in the component decorator, but the linting and the style guide recommend the opposite. So what's the team's thought on that, and is there going to be a change in our future direction?
Yeah, this is my fault. So when we shipped the beta of angular.dev in the last major version, I rewrote the components guide from scratch. And when I did that, I updated the guidance in that guide to say, use the host object and don't use host binding and host listener. And I was like, it'll be okay. This is in beta, so that this doesn't apply yet. But I think some people have seen that and then seen that the current style guide actually recommends the opposite. So my plan is to reconcile this very soon and kind of update the Angular style guide, and that will be recommending using the host object. We have some reasons for not wanting to use the, for like changing the recommendation here away from the host binding and host listener decorators. One is kind of, as we already talked about a little bit, the new kind of signal-oriented APIs that we have are kind of moving away from decorators and like class member decorators as kind of the API style we're going with. And 2, just these APIs, host binding and host listener, my view on these is that they kind of lead to like a little bit of spaghetti code in that like your host bindings then kind of end up peppered throughout a component instead of consolidated in one place where you have an easy view into like what is on your component. There's no way to set a like static attribute to a host element with the decorator, so you're unnecessarily creating kind of this dynamic binding. And honestly, the syntax for host listener is just like a little bit more verbose. So going to be updating the guidance. Hopefully, I'd like to also have like an optional refactoring schematic for this as well. But we will see.
All right, I'm going to take a few liberties with this question, but the standalone components for libraries guide, link to the guide, states that using an array is not supported by IDEs, i.e. JetBrains or e.g. JetBrains. Is this why Material still has modules?
I think Material is standalone now, no? Didn't we change it all? I think we already changed it.
Maybe just in the beta guide?
Does anybody? I don't actually remember, like 100% remember for sure, but I think we've changed all of Angular Material over to standalone true. Yeah.
I think the modules are just re-exports. Was my memory.
Like it still has the ng modules are still there. We didn't delete them, right? Because that would have been a huge breaking change. So they still exist.
You heard it here first.
All right.
Okay, my question is, for the longest time, I think that Angular has been a client-side rendering-based framework, but now it seems that there's more of a general push towards server-side rendering again within the JS ecosystem. And I was wondering what was the motivation from the team to support server-side rendering, and what do you see the future of that being?
I could comment a little bit about the motivation. So we've been running our Angular developer survey for a while, every year, and one of the biggest opportunities for improvement was exactly around server-side rendering. And we've been actually wanting to do that work. Part of the reason why we're doing it right now is just stacking this developer feedback and realizing that's really important for people. And also, we have a lot of expertise collaborating with Wiz around more advanced server-side rendering and hydration techniques, which further enhance this experience. So these are two of the motivations.
Yeah, I'll also say, we have been working very closely with the Chrome Aurora team. Gerald is up here with us from Chrome Aurora, and they see kind of very clear evidence out in the wild that server-side rendering and kind of related features to that are big improvements for core web vitals, right? Am I saying the right thing there? So, there's very clear evidence out there that it can improve performance and user experience for people building Angular applications.
Before we move on to the next question, if you do have questions, we are lining up over here. Just come over, line up, and be ready with your question.
All right, this is a pretty good one. When working in a legacy app and thinking of implementing some of these new shiny features, what would be the features that you would prioritize implementing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I can take a start, maybe.
I've also got some ideas.
Yeah, go for it.
So my thought, standalone, and then run that control flow migration, so you get that for like free.
What she said.
Really? Nothing to add, Alex?
I can add one more that I called this out in my SSR talk, but I think a lot of people don't really recognize it, that if you want to try adopting server-side rendering, that can sometimes be a bit of a big jump because, adding a new production server and trying to maintain that could be a lot of work. But you can just go all pre-rendering. You can pre-render your entire application and then just upload that to the existing server you already have that's already serving this. That doesn't work for every application, kind of depends on your UX a little bit. But I do think it's an important thing to think about as like a really easy way that you can take a legacy app without really changing a whole lot and still getting a lot of the benefits of static site generation and server-side rendering out of it. I think that's a really great like low barrier to entry that can give sort of get you your foot in the door for that whole set of features.
Also depends on the use case, like specifically if you're struggling with hitting certain performance benchmarks, let's say around core web vitals or your bundle is too big. Well, deferrable views might be a good fit for you. That's one of the easy ones. And you can approach similarly to other new features. If you have a need for something, you can just adopt it and take advantage of it.
Yeah. If you have a very image-heavy UI, then the optimized image directive is also a very good feature to start using and is very kind of straightforward to just drop into an existing app. Yeah. Also, like +1 to standalone.
Yeah, standalone, particularly because not only is standalone kind of a nice experience on its own, but it unlocks things like defer blocks. Defer blocks only can lazily load standalone components and directives.
So I believe Angular's view encapsulation was based on V0 of the Shadow DOM spec. Are there any plans to, in the future, to enhance that to support things like either equivalent to slotted in parts or just a replacement for ng-deep or content projection reasoning?
We don't have any active plans to expand the emulated style encapsulation with more Shadow DOM features. You can use Shadow DOM directly, right? You can set a component to view encapsulation Shadow DOM. What we really, really want is native CSS style scoping. There is a proposal out there for that, and we have been communicating to browser vendors that this is like the highest priority for us, that we really want this native CSS style scoping. And there is one browser vendor, I won't name names, who is not really on board with the proposal, and so it's not really going anywhere right now, but I hope that will change at some point.
So go upvote that proposal too.
Can I just add something? I think you might have something to say on ng-deep.
Oh, on ng-deep, yeah. I mean, I feel weird making like a formal announcement during the Q&A.
Want to make it, okay.
Yeah, the current plan is to undeprecate ng-deep.
Those were our deep thoughts.
I knew you would like this, so sorry, Jeremy.
That's a good thing to highlight. Like I mentioned earlier, I rewrote the components guide, and when I rewrote it, I didn't say in there that ng-deep is deprecated.
You would see no mention of it in the new ADF doc, so.
Yeah. So I would still say, right, like ng-deep will still be something I would say is discouraged, similar to the way I would discourage using like exclamation important in CSS, where it's like, well, you probably shouldn't, but I understand that sometimes you're going to do it anyway.
All right. Are there any plans to update what ng-serve is using so it can support more than just HTTP 1.1 protocol?
I don't think we have any specific plans on that. Like ng-serve is intended as a dev server, so for the most part, the HTTP protocol doesn't matter too much. I know we are kind of in the process of switching over to Vite. I'm honestly not entirely sure how they handle that. I think I'd be curious to understand better what the use case is for that and what kind of features you're really looking for, and then sort of working backwards from there as to what you're trying to accomplish with that. But as of now, we don't really have direct plans to expand that support.
Awesome.
When manually instantiating a component that is using input and view child and all that, what errors would you expect to see in tests? Sorry, I forgot the test part. When manually instantiating a test, what errors or exceptions or other issues would you expect to see if that component started using the view child input and those other signal factories?
Oh, for if you're using the new signal features and you try to instantiate these components in tests.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in tests, we kind of expect that components are going to be created through testbed. And that's because a component is something which inherently is backed by the framework and needs Angular there to function properly. I question whether a test can actually have real value for preventing problems if it's instantiated and executed in a way that's not equivalent to what's actually happening in production. And if you're using testbed to create the component, then view child and everything else will work just fine in a test environment, the same as it does in production. Kind of that's the point of testing. If I see a lot of people asking about, well, I don't want to use testbed to instantiate my component because I'm not testing the template, I'm not testing the queries, I just want to test my logic. I think there's a good argument there to move that logic then out of the component. If it's not actually needed, relying on the template, if it's not relying on the queries, that might be a good chance to refactor it into standalone functions or to services that can be tested independently of things like view child.
Perfect segue. In order to unit test the new input signal, we need to use set input, which is not type safe. Any plans to make something where we can easily test it type saved?
I really, really, really want this. There's some challenges in getting there. I think like it requires some bigger changes in the way our compiler architecture works. Those are long-term goals. I don't think we will see it kind of in the near-term future, but yes, we would like to get to that point.
Yeah. I actually have a question myself. So I know that there's been some work pushing towards making the observable primitive available in JavaScript outside of external libraries. And there's a push to get rid of the dependency on RxJS. Does that push continue to get away from observables if it becomes a primitive in the framework or in the language instead of depending on the library?
So the motivation to make RxJS optional also, not saying get rid of it because we don't want to get rid of it. We want to make it optional so that we can simplify the learning journey, which doesn't depend on whether observable is a standard or not. And also enable developers to not necessarily depend on RxJS in the ways that they don't want to. So we run our developer survey and we see a split, like 50% of people love to use RxJS and 50% of them prefer not to. With our project, we're trying to improve the lives of both groups by making RxJS an optional dependency and also providing this better integration with the interop package. And we have realized over time that RxJS is sometimes like a little bit sprinkled like randomly, not in the most optimal way in the framework, and we would like to reevaluate all this use and be more intentional about it. So this project is continuing to evolve, yeah. But observables being part of the standard will kind of reuse bundle size eventually for people using particular parts of the API.
Yeah, and I think like for those cases where there is something Angular wants to expose to the application that is very like stream of events shaped, platform observables would be something that we would consider if this is the right API to represent that concept.
All right, please don't kill the messenger. I'm just asking the question. Recruiting engineers with an Angular background can be challenging, especially relative to something like React. How does Google Angular and the community help elevate Angular in coding education and training, particularly at college or boot camps? Oh yeah, take it, Mark.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk about this because in 2022, 2023, I spent a lot of my time working on just education in general. So here's what we did. We actually reached out to lots of boot camps, lots of code schools, lots of programs, and tried to develop partnerships with them or relationships to be able to have them teach Angular. We actually had a really great relationship with one program, and they had something like 75,000 developers learn Angular through their program. And their program was based on our starter course that you can get on YouTube for free. So, and the relationship was based on any developer could go on and use it for free. So it couldn't be for profit where they could charge you to learn Angular if they wanted to be able to use our stuff because it's open source for that. And so we're gonna continue trying to build those relationships. We'll continue to try to make Angular.dev the best place to learn Angular to get started. But here's where I think you folks come in. There are some very, very talented instructors, brilliant minds in this audience, in this community in general, who can continue to create content, continue to create courses that will help elevate Angular's presence and learning. And one thing that I would also encourage you to think about is you've all learned Angular in such a way where you have spent a lot of time learning some of the intricacies, and sometimes we can say things like Angular is really hard to start with, but once you learn it, it gets better. Think about some of the changes that we've made over the last 2 years and how that changes that narrative for you. So when you talk about it to people, when you write your courses, when you write your blog posts, think about it from the way we do things now. Change detection is going to change. We have signals now. We have standalone components, so you don't have the dependency on the modules. So there are lots of changes that reduce the cognitive load that you needed before, which, listen, as a person who had to learn this stuff, I know that it was hard. Like, I'm not in the dark, but we've changed so much. And so we want to encourage you all to go out there and continue to build. We're going to continue to build, but continue to build content and courses and share them. And let us know if you do something really cool. Let us know. Maybe we can help boost it on Twitter and on X, online, etc. So, yeah, but great question.
Yeah, hello. One question. So we talked a bit about host object, right, to start the host element of a component. But a lot of the times we see actually no one styling anything about the host element at all. And it's just there for like, you know, just there to eat up a DOM node essentially. Have you ever thought about like either projecting the content of the component directly on the parent, or even creating some kind of like meta element on the HTML itself? Because sometimes you do, like, let's say you do a class, you know, like you do a styling on the host object, and then if you're looking at the code or you're looking at the UI, you don't see where the styling come from until you go into like the actual like TS file. So kind of like you get different places where you're styling the that component, right?
Yeah, sure. Have we thought about it? Absolutely, a lot. We're kind of, I think like in our roadmap, you can see we're focused on reactivity right now. But one of the things we have talked about is a desire to improve some of the friction points in the authoring format. We've talked about selector lists, you know, you saw in the keynote. Selector lists and host lists are kind of orthogonal things, but you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And so we're trying to understand, we need to have these discussions and debates still of like, do we want Angular to be a framework that's hostless, or do we want to continue using host elements? I think there'll probably be an RFC on that at some point. So the answer is like, we don't know yet. We're absolutely aware of the problems, and we want to have that conversation at some point.
All right, what is the team's take on Rust-based tooling? Ergo, TurboPack, and similarly, Bun. Is there any plan for Angular to support, i.e. able to leverage any of those tools? Or do you all consider it overhead, unnecessary to evaluate? That was like 12 questions, I apologize.
I mean, Alex isn't allowed to rewrite the Angular compiler in Rust yet. Yet.
Yeah, so I can maybe address some of the more direct things. So on the Angular team, like we've been, you know, the Angular CLI leverages a lot of third-party tooling and infrastructure, right? We've talked extensively about using ESBuild, talked about Vite, a lot of that infrastructure. ESBuild itself is written in Go, it compiles natively, right? There's a lot of native tooling that goes on under the hood. We're certainly open to other Rust tools. We're keeping an eye on the ecosystem for things like TurboPack and things like those. And so really the way that I see it is that Angular CLI is intended to try to integrate a lot of really quality tools in the ecosystem and make those available and work really easily for you. And so we want to try to pick things that perform well, pick things that are taking advantage of these native tool change. And that's probably going to expand in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if we get more and more of these tools going on. And so that's something that we're always keeping an eye out. And this is, you know, we've sort of started this process with Application Builder and getting on to ESBuild, and that'll probably continue with other tools. So keep an eye out in the future. And beyond that, I guess it's really up to Alex about rewriting the template compiler.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to, but maybe start it or not, I don't know. But just from a, you know, like the Angular CLI, right, has to be a stable platform. We have to be able to migrate your applications from version to version, so that necessarily changes more slowly. From an ecosystem perspective, I do think we're reaching a point where the performance of developer tooling is a bottleneck in a lot of cases. And so I think we're starting to see a lot of this attention on, hey, JavaScript's actually not a great language for this. If we write in something native, it doesn't have to be Rust. There is a lot of performance on the table there. So I think we will just generally see this as a continuing trend in the industry.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning too that for the time being, TypeScript itself is written in, you know, TypeScript running in Node, and we heavily rely on the TypeScript compiler and its APIs for a lot of what we do. So in some cases, right, there's not really another option.
That's why I'm so excited about selector lists.
Well, first things first, thank you for an amazing talk yesterday and today. So I'd like to hear some personal thoughts. So beside all the feature you mentioned, or the features coming soon, is there any feature or part of the Angular you want to fix or make it more convenient, or your personal thoughts?
I'm trying to convince these people to go in a more server components direction.
Yeah, I think we spent some time to focus on performance, and I think this is, the area where we can still add more improvements. So I think this is the area where I would like to participate and contribute more and evolve the framework more. Partial hydration is a good next step, and we're excited about that and excited, to make it available at some point and everyone to use it. So yeah.
Minko spoke about this during the keynote yesterday, and it is a big part of my heart. I talked to Alex about this a bunch, is changing our decorator, can't even say it right, our decorators, because if we think about, you got standalone true, then you got signals true, then you got this other thing, this other property, all these properties, and then it just continues to grow in scope. And I'm just thinking about, I wish we could figure out another way to shrink that down, which Minko hinted toward what we're thinking about. But that's one thing for me that I would love for us to, handle.
Alternatively, I think we should double down and just add flags for everything in the decorator. No, I think for me, I would like to spend some time improving how we do animations in general. That's something I would really love to spend time on overall.
I'm going to say one more obscure thing and one big thing, which is the obscure thing is I want us to do type checking for ARIA attributes in templates, where if you try to specify something that's invalid for an ARIA attribute, that will be a type compilation error, and actually have some template diagnostics around hey, you can't use role equals option inside role equals menu. That's invalid. So I'd love to have that. And then I would also like Angular expressions in templates to be just regular TypeScript.
Yeah, I think on my side, kind of echoes a lot of what we talked about in the SSR talk earlier today. But at least to me, a lot of the way that Angular has historically worked has been very much as a client-side rendered framework. That's kind of the way it was originally designed. And over time, we started to adopt more SSR features. We kind of bolted on tools and duct tape to sort of try and get it to work on the server. And it could kind of do that. But I think going forward, I would like to sort of rethink of Angular as more encompassing those server-side aspects and something that actually design it a bit from the ground up around what do these features mean on the client and the server, and how do we get them to interoperate with each other in the right way. And we're still early in that journey. I sort of shared some of the ideas about that in the SSR talk, but I think there's a long path to go there, and I'm optimistic that we can make some solid improvements in that area.
I have a bit less of time than those guys here and girls. There's one thing I wanted to improve recently. It was around internationalization, hard to say. Having rid of these static imports, and this is why there is a plan to move to the platform API known as INTL. So it would improve the DX around this. Not very big, but you could see this in the near future.
So I think if you look at the top issues on GitHub, the first one and the second one are kind of happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. The third one is variables and templates, local variables and templates. And that's the thing I would really like to see in the framework.
I am really happy with everything that is happening right now, actually. So the direction that we're heading towards and the small incremental steps that we're taking in order to get there, it's everything that I'll have ever wished. One thing, if I had a magic wand, one thing that I'll fix is just making sure that everyone is constantly on the latest version of Angular. But it's not necessarily only a technical problem. It's very often an organizational problem and third-party dependencies not being up to date and all that stuff. So we have some thoughts in this direction also, but
Yeah. So the takeaway is ng-update.
And a little bit more.
Mandatory ng-update.
ng-update or else.
Lucas is done. Okay. So I heard a rumor that you all, and by rumor I think it was said on stage, are working on AI experiments, and I didn't know if you had the opportunity or availability or permissions to speak about such things. Do you have any word to share?
Yeah, so ask me a specific question so I can give you a better answer.
Are you doing anything cool with AI right now? Like, can I look forward to using something with Angular and AI?
Okay, that's a great question. So can you look forward to using something with Angular and AI? So this is a project that Em and I are both working on 2 different streams. Well, I'm working on using generative AI to do a couple of things. One thing is, what could your translations look like? For example, if you build an app and you can just ask it to take your application and then translate it into multiple languages, right off the bat, and then you didn't have any other steps to do. And it would create, the XML file or JSON for you right off the bat. Like, could that be helpful to developers? And we don't know, so we want to know from you all, what is that something that you would want? Okay, I get some thumbs up, so that is enough for me to continue that work stream. So that's one path of it. And then the other thing I'm working on is generating actual application code. And will that ever land in your hands? That's the real question you want to know, right?
I would like to know.
Yeah, so we don't know the answer to that, because one thing that continues to happen every meeting that we have, and it literally keeps coming up, is this the best solution for Angular developers? Like, does this actually serve them, or are we forcing them to use something that doesn't really serve them? And so every time I come back with a prototype or a new plan, where they're like, okay, but is this the right answer? And it's a good conversation, it's a good question, because it's pushing us to build something that, if it ever does reach you all, it'll be good for the community, it'll serve you, and you'll actually get value out of it. But we just don't want to say, oh, us too. Sure, we also have an AI solution, and then no one ever uses it because you don't like it, right? So we want to continue. And so what we may do at some point is open up a small, tiny, little beta program with some of the GDEs to get some testing. Maybe if we get that far to where we feel confident that what we've built really will serve the developer community.
That was a nice prompt response, Mark.
So the defer block is really cool, and I think for us, we're getting kind of surface level use out of it today because of our server-side rendering kind of capabilities. I'm really excited about Jessica's talk yesterday and today, kind of about those abilities. But I think one more kind of iteration of that is kind of the ability, whether around the defer block or component authoring, to be able to import providers, kind of similar to how we can during routing. Do you guys see any ways around that, or even maybe a potential callback function once something loads at some point within the defer block?
So is the question like deferred loading things like services or other providers, or?
Yeah, so I think within state management, a lot of the time you see state slices that need to be imported, but you can't necessarily do that if you're just loading the component, right? So you can defer the component, but if you wanted to get that state value, you would still have to load that state value prior to the component being loaded.
Right.
But that state value might be heavy, right? So you don't necessarily want that.
It's like batching requests so that you're requesting the component and the data for that component at the same time.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that is something that we have certainly talked about. And in fact, this is, we talked earlier today, today and yesterday, about this Wiz framework that Google has. Wiz actually does this. It's built into it. And so it's definitely an idea that we're familiar with, and we've put a lot of thought into what the data story long-term with signals might be. And we don't have any answers yet, but the problem you're describing is definitely on our minds. I don't know if, Alex, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's a good answer, that there is kind of defer is fairly minimal right now in terms of the API that it actually gives you, especially the ability to do anything imperative with it. And there is some question of what features do we want to add and expand there over time? Should defer expose its state as a callback or a signal or something like that?
And one concern we also have is like, is defer the right primitive for this, or do we need to expand it to something else? Because as we keep adding things to that defer parameter block, it gets pretty bloated, and we don't want to like oversaturate that with too much.
Like, I think the most likely scenario is that it would be like a particular component would have like data dependencies in the way that it has kind of like service dependencies today. And so that you would, when you go to, load a component, you're also kind of fetching its data dependencies in one kind of batch operation.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, we are locking down the line.
Yes. We're also going to move to quick questions. So quick questions and then one response.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are you comfortable with a rapid fire so we can make sure we get everyone's awesome? All right, let's do it.
Hi. My question is, now we have support of signals in ng model, which is awesome, but it is now for primitives. Do you have plans to support nested objects like we saw today in ng-Rick's talk? It's called Deep Signal. Was really curious.
Yeah, so signals you can put any object, any value in them, no matter how complex. It does get a little bit awkward because when you update it, you have to update it in an immutable way, which can be a little bit tricky. I saw there are some language primitives coming for arrays and things to make this easier, doing immutable array optimizations. But we are working with a lot of state management libraries in the community, and a lot of them are kind of focused on this particular problem of how do you signal things that are bigger than just primitive values in an ergonomic way. So I expect to see different options from the community, like the signal store.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just curious, just circling back to Jeremy, what you said earlier about undeprecating ng-deep. Is that something you're still planning? Would it get undeprecated in V18? Or because I feel a lot of times people use it because they just don't understand, just like they don't understand how to solve for the problem for which they're using important. They don't understand the CSS specificity and they end up using important, and a lot of times it's used as a hack instead of understanding it. And so a lot of code reviews that I have to go through are just trying to help people understand, you don't really have to use it. So just curious, when you said that, how are you seriously considering it, or?
So the way it is right now is angular.dev, there's nothing on there that says ng-deep is deprecated. And in V18, angular.dev will become, the actual official documentation site. And so unless we change something, it will become undeprecated. I don't know that anybody plans on changing anything. So I think it's pretty safe to say that that's happening unless something extraordinary happens.
I had two people come into line, ask about something that I also wanted to ask about. So if somebody wants to touch on, because it hasn't been touched on, to my knowledge, the entire conference, Angular Forms, template and reactive, sorry, brain fart. What's the plans with the future of forms, especially with the introduction of signals?
Yeah, I can take this if you want. Yeah, go ahead. So with forms, we have kind of two different steps in mind, two different phases of how we're thinking about kind of changing forms in response to all the reactivity work that we're doing. The first is to bolt signals onto the existing form system. So to make it so you can access the value as a signal, and the touch status as a signal, and the errors as a signal. And that's important for another reason, which is we want forms to be zoneless compatible. And it's tough to use forms sometimes in on-push environments today because some of these properties, don't mark things for check when they're updated. Signals will solve that problem and bring forms kind of into the zoneless compatible realm. The second thing we want to do is go back and kind of look more holistically at forms and think about how they could work built with signals from the core, where the validity is actually a derivation, a computed of the value, rather than just adding them on to the existing system. And that's a time when we're also thinking maybe it would make sense to try to converge signal or template and reactive forms in some ways. So we don't have any kind of designs there. This is kind of early concept phase, but that's something we'd like to do. We've heard that that's a huge kind of problem in the community. that we have two form systems, and kind of it makes it hard to work with them sometimes.
That was a very formal response.
All right, that's enough from you, okay?
Do you need more reflection time?
That will conclude our Angular team panel. Everybody, please give it up for the Angular team.
We are going to ask one of the main organizers, Mr. Joe Eames, to come up and close us out. Won't you join us, Joe?
Get it, Joe?
Wow, thanks for that. Mark, you're like worth 10 people. All right, so we come to the end of yet another ng-conf, and honestly, another awesome one. Everything went really smoothly, everything went great, and I just want to take a quick moment to thank the people who made this possible, and then talk about a couple of things for tonight. So, obviously, we don't have anything to talk about if we don't have a framework that gets built. So let's please give a round of applause to the Angular team for all their hard work. And corresponding to that, we don't have a great framework if tools aren't built around it, and education isn't built around it, and all the pieces of community isn't built around it. So to all of those who spend their free time building and making things that make Angular greater, please, let's give a round of applause. And then, of course, we don't get to have a conference if people don't show up and donate a little bit of money to pay for all this stuff. So for all those attendees who are here in person, and for those who are watching online, thank you so much. And naturally, the reason that you all came here was to listen to people speak. So of all the people who have done something amazing, what we have is a large group of just fantastic individuals who spend a ton of time, who get no compensation for what they do, to come here and to get up on stage and sweat and hope that they get something delivered and watch that little timer count down and worry about having Mike and Alyssa jump up here and pull them off stage. So let's hear it for our speakers. And just so that you all know, we kind of threaten speakers with life and limb because schedules get so tight. So we did a little drawing for the speakers, and I'm not going to announce who actually won, but we have a couple of special gifts for a couple of our speakers who were under the time limit on their talks. So again, thank you to all those speakers, and especially those who went under time. And a big important part of all of this, and what really pays all the bills on top of what you guys bring in, are our sponsors, and having them here to have amazing things, products to present, people to talk to, maybe a new job to hire into. They're a really important part, so let's hear it for our sponsors. Now, we wouldn't be able to have this if we didn't have this amazing hotel. So we've got the Grand America Hotel and this beautiful building that they've built. And along with them, we have a lot of people who work behind the scenes and make this all possible, which is our partner Showgear, who is our AV company, Mustache, who does our video streaming, and several other individual groups that have done pieces that make this all possible. So let's hear it for all of those people. Now I have to thank two of my favorite people who love the sound of their own voice so much. Mike and Alyssa, who are fantastic MCs. And then this year, because we did something crazy and threw a second track together somewhat last minute, we also brought in a couple of extra MCs that were willing to devote their time and their energy to help us all out. So Lucas and Laura, thank you so much for your time. And I did have a lot of help with other people that you don't see that helped with the organization of this and helped with CFP selection and that. And so I also want to thank all of those people. And now lastly, one of my favorite things to do is to thank Zero Slip Events. So all of those wonderful women and men who you see walking around in the light blue shirts, who are handling all the registration, you really have no idea how much this show, this event, is a product of all of their work and planning all year long. So, Sunny, will you please come up onto the stage? Sunny and her crew do so much, and I really can't compliment them enough. Sunny even married somebody just so that he could run all of our AV coordination for us. That was a really big part of her commitment to this conference. But really, the Zero Slip Events crew, they work tirelessly. They're here late, they're here early, they wrap everything, they pack everything. All of you people who are online who are gonna get your swag, it's because they're gonna spend their time and effort shipping all that out to you. And not only do they do these mechanical things, but they help organize the event. They help decide what kind of fun things that we do and what things are gonna look like. They design all the graphics. They really are a big, huge part of this show. So I wanna give them a big thank you, and we have a little special gift for all of you. Okay, last thing we have to talk about is tonight. We're not quite done because we have karaoke tonight. So, yeah, anybody who's still gonna be here, we're starting at 8. It's in the next room where we were eating. We're gonna have karaoke. We're gonna go from 8 until midnight. There will be alcohol for those who like alcohol. And there will be singing for those who like singing. And then there will also be drunk people for those who like to watch drunk people sing badly. So, enjoy yourselves. Catch some karaoke tonight if you're still here, and we will see you in 2025.